In Blender and 3D in general, drivers are a way of having an input drive the output of something else. For example, we can make the rotation of this monkey drive the location of this cube. Now that's a really simple example. However, it is possible to do some really fancy things with drivers. Here, I'm creating a bouncing ball based on a mathematical expression and the current frame number. This function in here is taking a few inputs, it's taking the frame range and a few custom properties, and it's driving the output, which is the height of the ball. Now don't worry, we won't be doing anything as silly or as complicated as this in this course. We're going to keep it simple. And we're only going to scratch the surface of what drivers can do, because I don't want to overwhelm you too much by explaining a bunch of things that you're probably not going to need right now. In rigging, we often add a custom property to a bone and then use that to drive the influence of a constraint. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this lesson. Simple, yet powerful. Now, what is a custom property, I hear you ask? A custom property is a way of attaching your own data to anything inside Blender. Now, custom properties can be strings, that is text, or it could be many forms of numbers. It could be a Boolean, which is a true or false, which in Blender is just converted to a 0 or a 1. It could be an integer, which is a number that does not have a decimal point. It could be a float, which is a number that does have a decimal point, or it could also be a vector, which is an array of numbers. However, for this lesson, we're just going to focus on a float number that goes between 0 and 1. Now, all this sounds pretty fancy and complicated, but really it's not. Let me show you how easy it is. Let's get started. So let's learn about drivers and custom properties. All right, so I'm starting from a totally blank scene, and the first thing I'm going to do is add in an armature. So I'm going to choose my armature here, single bone, and let's turn on our bone name so you can see. And I'm just going to duplicate this one here, just with Shift D. I'm not worried about the position of these ones because this isn't a real example, it's just for demonstration purposes. So this bone here, I'm going to add a couple of constraints to and drive them. So this one's going to be our owner. This one is going to be the target number 1, target 0, 1, and this guy is going to be target 0, 2. Okay, so we jump into pose mode to add our constraints, and we're going to select our target first. Shift select this one, and I'm going to choose a copy location, just like our other example that I think, hopefully I'll put these videos in the right order, so you've already done this one before. Otherwise, bear with me, it'll make sense in a few videos time. That one's jumped over there, and this is the constraint there. I'm going to leave it at world space. I'm going to leave all these at the same. Will mute it so we can actually see our bone in the middle again. And now I'm going to select the second target, and then this guy, and then Control Shift C, copy location. So now I have two constraints going on. So actually, I'll unmute that one. And what I want to do is create a custom property that drives these values independently of each other. Well, not independently. I want one to go up and one to go down. Now, in this example, there's going to be an error, and this is a design of my tutorial. But I want to show you the concept of how you get one property to control these two things. And then I'll show you how to fix the errors that I've made. All right, so I'm just going to mute these so we can see the bone in its default position. And we are going to add a custom property. As you learned from the intro, you can, it can be a string or a number. We're going to use the float numbers, and there's many places that you can add a custom property. We can add it on the object level. So if I click the object tab, down here we've got custom properties. We could add it on the data level. So down here we have custom properties, and we can add it on the bone level. And this is also, in the pose bone. So in pose mode, we can add it, or in edit mode, we can add it. Now, where do we want to add it? Well, we'll just think about it logically. We want this to be a property that can be animated by an animator, and that should happen in pose mode. So it should be in pose mode. And if this is going to be a bone that is going to be controlled by the animator, we actually want it on the bone level. So that makes logical sense to put it on the bone level in pose mode. Now, that might be a little bit confusing, but 99% of the time, you do want to add your custom properties to the bone level in pose mode. There's just a few exceptions where you would add it elsewhere, but most of the time on the bone level, pose mode. I've just clicked add there, and this has added a property. Now, if I click on the edit, you can see I can edit the settings here. So here we have a property name. We can give this a proper name. Let's normally you would give it a logical name, but for this example, I'm just going to call it my prop, just to show you how to change the property name there. Now, the property value here is where we would change it. At the moment, the default is this is set to a float, which is a number with a decimal point. If we made this a number that didn't have a decimal point, it would become an integer. If you typed a string or anything in here, like string, it would become a string property. Or if you typed true, it would become a Boolean, although that would be converted into a 0 or a 1, where true is 1 and false would be 0. But we are going to leave it at the default 1.0 for now, because that is the settings that we need for this particular tutorial. Now, the default value, we can leave it at 1, but this will be if we right-click on the value and say return to default, this is what it's going to return to. So we can leave it on 1 if we want. So the minimum and the maximum, I do want it to be between 0 and 1, but I'll just quickly show you. If I raise this up to 10, now my property will go from 0 to 10, and the soft limits down here, this is going to say, hey, what value do you want the user to be able to slide to in the UI? So I can just say, well, I'm going to make this 1.0. And now my soft limit is between 0 and 1, but the actual maximum goes up to 10. Let me just show you what that means. So here we've got my property, and this will also show up in the item tab when we have our bone selected. So this is the same thing. You can see that is the same thing. But now, with the soft limits, I can just drag with my mouse only up to that value of 1, what the soft limit was. But I can still type in here. I can type in, say, 5, because that is below our maximum, or I can go all the way up to 10. So that is what the soft limit does. So I'm just going to disable that and return it back to the value of 0 and 1. Now, with the is library overrideable, if you're going to link this into a new scene, say for animation, and you're going to create a library override, then you would need to make sure that you enable this one so that the animator can actually edit it in that other scene. If you don't enable this one, when it gets linked in, this property won't be able to be changed. So hopefully that makes sense. I know I haven't spoken about library overrides in this course, but I have spoken about it in many of the other lessons. So you can just think about this setting as if you are going to link the character in, make sure that you enable this on your properties. And the last thing that I haven't showed you is a tooltip down here. So you can actually just type in some helpful information. So some helpful information. And now when we hover over it, I'll just click OK. So when we hover over it, you'll see it pop up. Whoops. my property, some helpful information. So that's the tooltip there, which I think you'll agree is not helpful information at all. And now I want this property to actually drive these values here, but I want one to go on and the other one to go off with the same property. Sounds tricky, but it's not. So I'm just going to split this vertically and turn one into my drivers editor. And what I want to do first is I want to show you the long way of setting up a driver, and then I want to show you the quick way, just so you have a better understanding of things. So if I wanted to add a driver to this property here, I would hover my mouse over it, right click and say add driver. You can see the shortcut is Control D. And then that will show up in my drivers window here. If I hit N, you can see we've got more information about our driver. And here it's actually just created a scripted expression, and the expression is going to be variable plus 1.0, which you will need to edit. And down here, this is the name of our variable, which is red, which means it's not actually working. So what this scripted expression will do, it will take this var and it will replace it here. So it'll take the var and then add 1 to it. So I'm actually going to delete that because I just want to take this one. And then we can change our settings down here. And I want it to be a single property. And then we need to choose the object. We only have one object called armature. And then we need to find the path to this property. Now, thankfully in Blender, we can right click and say copy data path, or the shortcut Shift Control C. And then we just hover over here and paste it with Control V. And that is going to paste that there. And then when we click update, you'll see that this purple value will change with when we change our my property here. And let's just zoom in on our mapping here. So you can think about the drivers as the horizontal axis is the input and the vertical axis is the output. So if we're looking at here, this is our input and we go up, the input is here. And let's have a look at the output over here. So input is 1 and our output is 1. If we go to the halfway mark, you can see this line is moving. And it's 0.61 and our value is 0.61. Now this line here doesn't need to be a straight line. We can actually edit it if we want. And then, just change the mapping so that when our input, I'll grab this one as well. So when our input is 0.61, we go over here, our output is between 0.2 and 0.4, which is actually 0.284. So that's the way that we would change the mapping. Although for this example, we don't need to do any of that. So I'm going to undo, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. And that would be how we set up a driver the long way. Now I think you'll agree that that was pretty long. So what I'm going to do is just delete this driver. So I can actually delete it by selecting it here and then hitting delete or X, and that's gone. Or I could just right click in here and say delete driver. So all of that is gone. I've now disconnected it. Now I'm going to show you the fast way of doing it. So here's my property. I can right click here, and rather than copying the data path, I can copy as a new driver. And what that will do is Blender will be smart enough to do all those behind the scenes things and copy it into the buffer. And then I can hover over where I want to paste this and go right click and paste the driver. Ciao. And I think you'll agree, actually let me select that. I think you'll agree that that was much faster than having to set up all of this stuff here. Okay, so that's working. Actually, let me just enable these ones. And now I want to copy this driver and put it down here, but then change the mapping so one turns on as the other turns off. It sounds complicated, but it's not. Now remember, I still have that driver copied into the buffer, so I can just right click and paste the driver. But if you've done something else and it's no longer in your buffer or whatever, you can actually just hover over this driver and say copy driver. So now I've copied this exact same driver. I'm going to paste it here, paste. So now I have two ones that are working exactly the same. So when I slide this one down, they're both going to go on, which is not what we want, but you can see the effect that that's having on our bone here. I actually want one to turn off. So I'm going to just pick one, just because of, for demonstration purposes. I want, when my input is at 0, I want the output of this one to be 1. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to first select the correct one. So this is our first one up here. And then I'm going to go to the modifiers. And I can add a modifier and click generator. And this is just going to be a polynomial expression, or y equals mx plus c. Right, so I can actually change this. Actually, I'll just mute that other driver so you can only see the one that we're working with. When you add this generator, it's actually taken over those keyframes and they're no longer there. And we're just working with this value here. So I can actually change this value. And if you remember from mathematics, if we want to change the slope, we can change this to be a -1 and it will go in the opposite direction. So now it's going -1. But I need to move it up so that when my input is at 0, the value is at 1. So how do we do that? We just change this one here, we type in 1 to here, and now we've got the slope working the way that we want. So if we enable both of these, you'll see we've got the X. But now let's just slide this down and you can see over here on my purple, one goes on and one goes off. That's actually what I wanted. That's how we connect the same property to two separate drivers and have them do opposite things. So pretty handy, I think you'll find. Now, one thing that you'll notice is when we go from our left position over to our right position, our bone is curving here. And if this is not what I want for this example, I just wanted it to go in a straight line. And why is it curving? And that is because in edit mode, it's partially going back towards its own default position. Now that I've shown you how I've done all this hard work, I'm actually going to correct it because it's not actually what I need for this situation. I want to get rid of this bend in the curve. And the way to do that is I actually don't need this driver on this position here. So I'm just going to right click and delete the driver and then raise it all the way up to 1. And that's because of the way that the constraint stack is going to operate. It's going to calculate from the bottom down. So if I have this one at 100%, it's always going to start here. And then when I slide from there, it's just going to go from this position to this position. It's not going to partially go back to its own starting position. So there we go. Hopefully you've learned a few things about how to create a custom property and the drivers editor. So the main thing I wanted to show you was how to connect this property or any custom property that we create to many different outputs and have them do different things. So hopefully you've learned something, but I'll see you in the next lesson.